The Treaty of Versailles is a sizable document that was presented to Germany on May 7, 1919, but wasn't signed until June 28, 1919. The Treaty of Versailles was signed in the Hall of Mirrors in the Versailles Palace near Paris, hence the document's name.
In the key, the red represents the demilitarized zone, meaning the zone where Germany's army was revoked. The yellow represents the land that was lost by Germany due to the treaty, and the purple represents the land that was voted by the representative to remain Germany's property. The Treaty of Versailles had forced Germany to pay reparations for the whole World War I, which came to about £6,600 million monthly.
Reparations ruined Germany's economy, but when Germany failed to make its January 1923 payment, French troops invaded Ruhr. Eventually, in April 1921, the League of Nations agreed sum of £6.6 billion in installments until 1984, and defeated Germany had to agree to pay. Germany's representatives at Versailles found the terms of the treaty very humiliating. Germany further agrees to provide for the salaries and expenses of the Commission and of such staff as it may employ.
The findings of the commissions as to the amount of damage defined as above shall be concluded and notified to the German government on or before May 1, 1921, as representing the extent of that government's obligations.
All nations that had participated in the war were represented, although the most influential were the principal allies. The principal allies were the following: Great Britain, France, Italy, Japan, and the United States. The Allies wanted outcomes. In January 1919, Allied statesmen met near Paris to discuss a final peace settlement. Dozens of nations were invited to attend, but in the end, the conference was dominated by three men: British Prime Minister David Lloyd George, French Premier Georges Clemenceau, and American President Woodrow Wilson. Clemenceau, with the wholehearted support of his countrymen, was determined to make sure that Germany would never again be powerful enough to threaten the peace of Europe.
President Wilson and Georges Clemenceau each had a different agenda. That of Wilson was to create a new world order under the rule of the League of Nations, only to see his work destroyed when the United States Congress refused to participate in the League on the terms he demanded. That of Clemenceau was to reconstruct Europe so that Germany could never again threaten her stability. British Prime Minister Lloyd George worried that certain treaty terms would prove a constant source of irritation, stirring up a resentment among the Germans. The sooner the question of reparations could be resolved, he said, the better.
The Treaty of Versailles was a compromise that pleased no one. French Premier Clemenceau had failed to achieve all of the demands of the French people, who complained that the peace terms were too lenient and that Germany should have been partitioned into smaller, weaker states.
Negotiations.
Germany was required to disarm.
Germany and its former allies were not allowed to take part in the negotiations. Negotiations almost broke down several times before a final agreement was reached in June 1919. The result, a compromise that imposed harsh peace terms on a defeated Germany. The League of Nations also took control of Germany's overseas colonies. Germany had to return the Russian land taken in the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. Some of this land was made into new states: Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia, and enlarged Poland also received some of this land.
Germany's army was reduced to 100,000 men. The army was not allowed an air force. She was allowed only 6 capital naval ships and no submarines.
The loss of vital industrial territory would be a severe blow to any attempts by Germany to rebuild her economy. Coal from neighboring territories taken away from Germany in the treaty was also a vital economic loss. Combined with the financial penalties linked to reparations, it seemed clear to Germany that the Allies wanted nothing else but to bankrupt her. Germany was also forbidden to unite with Austria to form one superstate in an attempt to keep her economic potential to a minimum.
Germany had to admit full responsibility for starting the war. This was Clause 231, the infamous War and Guilt Clause. Germany was responsible for all of the war damage caused by the First World War. Therefore, she had to pay reparation, the bulk of which would go to France and Belgium to pay for the damage done to the infrastructure of both countries by the war. Reparations could be in kind or cash. Germany's reaction. At first, the Germans refused to sign the peace agreement, but they had little choice. They had already turned over most of their arms and warships to their allies. When the allies threatened to invade, the Germans relented. The Germans believed that other countries, such as Russia and Austria, were to blame for the war spreading, and that they alone could not be regarded as guilty of starting the war. The peace terms caused lingering resentments in Germany. Germans were embittered by the way so many German speakers were placed under the rule of other countries. The demand for huge reparations, far more than could ever be paid, were seen as unjust. So was the fact that Germany was given no say in the treaty's terms. Many Germans were still bitter about the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. The Allies insisted that Germany pay billions in war reparations, which was a source of festering resentment. When Germany was caught up in the worldwide depression of the 1930s, Germans were ready to blame the economic disaster that had overwhelmed them on the treaty's demands. A large part of the people turned to the Nazi Party and its leader, Adolf Hitler, who condemned the peace treaty and vowed to regain Germany's lost territories and restore its military might.
The treaty became known as a command, as it was being forced on them, and the Germans had no choice but to sign it. Many in Germany did not want the treaty signed, but the representatives there knew that they had no choice, as Germany was incapable of restarting the war. In one last gesture of defiance, the German naval force held at Scapa Flow, north of Scotland, scuttled itself, or in other words, deliberately sank itself.
The contents of the Treaty of Versailles are the following: the Covenant of the League of Nations, political clauses for Europe, German rights and interests outside of Germany, military, naval, and air clauses, prisoners of war and graves, penalties, reparations, financial clauses, economic clauses, aerial navigation, ports, waterways, and railways, labor, procedures, guarantees, and miscellaneous provisions. Germany tried multiple times to fight against the Treaty of Versailles terms. For example, in 1932, the German government had announced that it would no longer acknowledge the treaty's military limitations. Also, the German government ordered to strike, but the French counteracted by killing over 100 German workers. Next, on September 1st, 1939, Germany had violated the treaty by invading Poland, which had started World War II in Europe. Lastly, Adolf was an assistant to how Germany fought back against the treaty. He helped Germany regain men in their army, which gave German citizens more confidence to fight back against the treaty.